Dutch presence on the islands that form the present-day country of Indonesia began in the early 17th century, with the Dutch first controlling the islands through the Dutch East India Company and later directly naming the colony the Dutch East Indies. With their center of operations located in Batavia, the Dutch gradually gained control of many other islands that by the early 20th century, the Dutch East Indies comprised an archipelago of over 17,000 islands. Dutch interests in the colony were mainly economic, first with the spice trade and later the setting up of vast agricultural plantations that provided immense profits to the motherland. In the early 20th century, the Dutch government implemented ethical policy, a set of socio-economic reforms that included expanding education, that of allowing more native youths to enter the school system that had previously been reserved for Dutch and European children. As a result, a politically active native educated elite soon developed who were imbued with the Western ideals of liberty, democracy, and equality. A national identity also formed among the native population, and by the 1920s, many nationalist groups had organized that advocated different ideologies, including democracy, Islamic theocracy, communism, and socialism, and which sought varying levels of autonomy or independence through peaceful or violent means. Emerging as the leaders of this nationalist movement were Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta, who called for the end of colonial rule. Also by then, these nationalists had adopted the word Indonesian to express the common identity for the hundreds of different ethnic groups in the Dutch East Indies, and Indonesia to denote the totality of a future nation. During World War II, the Dutch East Indies was invaded and occupied by Japanese forces. Japanese authorities encouraged independence sentiments and co-opted Sukarno, who was by now a well-known public figure, and other nationalists, appointing them to local and regional civil positions. The Japanese viewed the Indonesian nationalists as a means to advance their war effort, while the latter deemed their collaboration as a way to achieve independence. However, on August 15, 1945, Japan surrendered to the Allies, bringing World War II to a sudden end. Although Japanese forces still remained, a political vacuum was created by Japan's surrender, leading Sukarno to declare on August 17, 1945, the colony's independence as the Republic of Indonesia. A campaign was launched to spread the news of independence to the other islands. However, apart from Java and Sumatra, only limited revolutionary atmosphere was generated in the other regions, particularly in the east. Sukarno's proclamation of Indonesia's independence brought a state of war with the Allied powers because the latter were determined to regain control of the territory for its return to Dutch colonial rule. And in the meantime that Allied forces had yet to arrive on the islands, the Allied High Command had ordered the Japanese forces to carry out policing duties and maintain law and order. In the period following Sukarno's declaration of Indonesia's independence, widespread violence and anarchy prevailed, caused mainly by pro-independence armed bands that targeted sectors associated with the Dutch regime, as well as by pro-Dutch militias that clashed with the pro-independence groups. These anti-Dutch militias, prevalent mainly in Java and Sumatra, were motivated by political, economic, religious, social, and ethnic causes. Eventually, the Indonesian government began to take greater control of the regions, and the violence and anarchy gradually came to an end. In late August 1945, Indonesian forces clashed with Japanese army units when the latter tried to reoccupy previously abandoned areas. By September 1945, the first Allied forces had arrived, gaining control of the eastern territories where revolutionary activity was minimal. Soon, Allied forces also arrived in Java and Sumatra, taking control of large sections of these islands and prompting Sukarno to move his government to Yogyakarta in central Java. In October 1945, Japanese forces regained control of Bandung and Semarang for the Allies. Also that month, British forces seized Surabaya with a land, air, and sea attack on the city. In March 1946, in Bandung, the Indonesian revolutionaries, forced by the British to withdraw, set fire to a large section of the city in what is known as the Bandung Sea of Fire. Communal violence also erupted in East Sumatra, where elements supporting the revolutionaries attacked groups aligned with the old colonial order. Meanwhile, the Netherlands, greatly weakened by World War II, was unable to immediately re-establish its authority in the Dutch East Indies. But by April 1946, Dutch troops had begun to arrive in large numbers and the colonial administration was reinstalled, which restored Dutch authority in the capital, Batavia, and the other major areas of Java and Sumatra and the rest of the pre-war colony. In late 1946, British and other Allied forces departed after completing their mission in the territory, that of repatriating Japanese forces back to Japan and freeing the Allied prisoners of war. Under mediation efforts by British authorities, the Dutch government and Indonesian revolutionaries held talks that led to a ceasefire, and then in November 1946 to the signing of an agreement that ended the territory's colonial status and in its place the establishment by January 1949 of a federal nation called the United States of Indonesia. However, both sides were not fully content with the agreement and had different interpretations of its provisions, leading to more radical elements restarting hostilities in early 1947. A period of mounting tensions and unyielding positions finally led in July 1947 to Dutch forces launching Operation Product, an offensive into Indonesia-controlled Java and Sumatra. The Dutch seized large sections of these territories, forcing the Indonesian army to withdraw to the hinterlands from where it waged a guerrilla war. At this point, the United States and United Nations became involved, with the UN releasing Resolution 27 in August 1947 that called for an end to the fighting. Also under UN mediation, the two warring sides held talks that led to the formation of the Van Mook Line, a delineation of their respective areas of control, which increased Dutch areas in Java and Sumatra as Dutch forces had advanced into Indonesian territory. In January 1948, the two sides signed the Renville Agreement, which confirmed the Van Mook Line, but with the provision that a referendum would be conducted in Dutch-held areas to decide whether the residents there wanted to be under Indonesian or Dutch authority. With these setbacks, the Indonesian Republic became weakened politically and militarily. Further undermining its position occurred when its Islamic supporters in West Java broke away to form the Darul Islam, with the Islamist militants fighting both the Indonesian and Dutch forces in West Java, Aceh, and South Sulawesi. Furthermore, two of its other allies, the Communists and Socialists, also broke ranks and formed a separate state, the Indonesian Soviet Republic in East Java. The Indonesian military subsequently quelled these rebellions. However, the Indonesian government also faced financial difficulties and had to disband some of its army units, further weakening its military position. In December 1948, the Dutch military, taking advantage of the revolutionaries' internal problems, launched Operation Crow, a major offensive that captured large sections of Indonesian-held areas, including the republic's capital, Yogyakarta. Sukarno and Hatta were captured without resistance, this action being deliberate on their part as they correctly surmised that this latest action by the Dutch military would be condemned by the international community. On December 24, 1948, the UN intervened with Resolution 63, which called for a ceasefire and the immediate release of Sukarno and other Indonesian leaders. By this time, international pressure was bearing down on the Netherlands. More crucially for the Dutch government, the United States threatened to cut off Marshall Plan aid to the Netherlands, funds that were so vital for its post-World War II reconstruction. As a result, the Dutch ended their offensive and the ceasefire was signed in January 1949. Then, yielding to international pressure, in April 1949, the Netherlands reversed its plan to restore colonial rule in the Dutch East Indies and announced that it was transferring sovereignty of Dutch-held territories to Indonesia. Then, following talks held in April to May 1949, Dutch and Indonesian negotiators signed an agreement that ended hostilities, restored the Indonesian Republic in Yogyakarta, and arranged a conference to determine the territory's political future. After a series of meetings at The Hague in November 1949, the Netherlands agreed to cede sovereignty of Dutch-controlled states to Indonesia, the combined polity being a federal nation called the United States of Indonesia, with Sukarno and Hatta as its president and vice president respectively. In turn, the Indonesian Union and the Netherlands would form a loose association called the Netherlands-Indonesia Union under the Dutch monarchy. West New Guinea, which formed part of the Dutch East Indies and claimed by Indonesia by way of state succession, was agreed to remain with the Netherlands until future negotiations regarding its future could be held. Then on December 27, 1949, the Netherlands officially relinquished authority over the Indonesian Union, which became a fully sovereign, independent state. From the outset, the Indonesian Union faced many problems. In January 1950, a force of Dutch and anti-republic fighters attacked Bandung and Jakarta in a failed attempt to overthrow Sukarno's government. The coup attempt reinforced the already widespread perception that the Indonesian Union was a Dutch machination. Regional unrest also threatened the survival of the fledgling nation. In April 1950, separatist guerrillas in South Maluku set up a rival regional government, and in 1956 to 1957, rebellions broke out in Sumatra and North Sulawesi. Indonesian forces quelled these uprisings. Under strong influence by Sukarno, the government undermined the federal structure, compelling the various states to dissolve and become subsumed under the authority of the Indonesian Republic. On August 17, 1950, the Indonesian Union was abolished, and Sukarno declared Indonesia a unitary state. In 1956, the government abolished the Netherlands-Indonesia Union because of the stalled talks regarding the future of West New Guinea. Dutch corporations in Indonesia were seized and nationalized, leading to the two countries cutting ties in 1960. In 1960 to 1962, Indonesian forces launched a number of unsuccessful infiltration raids in West New Guinea. A planned full invasion for August 1962 was cancelled when by then the Dutch government had relented and agreed to give up sovereignty over West New Guinea, soon turning over its administration to the UN. In May 1963, the UN handed over West New Guinea to Indonesia, which the latter renamed as West Irian and its 26th province. A requirement by the UN for its transfer was that a plebiscite would be held to determine the political aspirations of the residents there. A referendum was subsequently held in 1969 involving 1,000 tribal leaders who voted unanimously to join Indonesia.